Now, water can flow, or it can crash. Be water, my friend.
Let's take a look at Fighter. Fighter has 3 purposes with skills. We've got damage skills, utility skills, and iframe skills, invincibility frame skills. Some skills have multiple purpose, like Blink Strike has damage and utility for knockdown. Broad Cut has damage, but its main purpose is iframes. And Full Moon Slash has iframes, but it also does some damage, so on and so forth. All the skills have one primary and then a secondary purpose. Downward Thrust is mostly utility for knockdown, but it's not really good at that. I would rather have many other skills opposed to Downward Thrust. Antler Toss is primarily damage, but it has utility for stagger and knockdown. And then Full Moon is good for damage, iframes. Skyward Slash, you should really try another skill. It's only good for a few, and then wasted on many others. Hindsight is iframe. It has some damage, but really it is for the iframe bit. Stone Will is just purely utility. And then Dragon's Maw is all 3. It has damage, it has iframes, and it's got good knockback, knockdown. So when I look at Fighter, I go for 1 damage skill, 1 utility skill, and 1 iframe skill. And for damage, I always go with Antler Toss. It has great stagger, knockdown, and good damage. My iframe is always Full Moon Slash. It's quick, short, and has good damage with it. You can go with other iframes, but sometimes they're too short or too long, and it leaves you vulnerable. I'm not a big fan of Hindsight because it pulls you away from the enemy. And then my utility, I like Skewer a lot. Skewer is great for utility. It is limited to 1 enemy at a time and will leave you vulnerable to other enemies, but it is useful no matter what your weapon. You can have the lowest tier weapon and it functions properly as its tool. And Blink Strike is also good for knockdown, and it's a good evasion skill as well, or to pull you in closer to enemies. The shield skills are a little limited. The only one that I must have is Shield Storm for stagger, which then I can get knocked down with Antler Toss. Onslaught is great for enemies that are weak to blunt damage, like skeletons. And then Sheltered Assault is good for lots of things, while keeping your shield blocking. But the main thing with the shield is Perfect Block. And Perfect Block will stagger and often knock down, and that is the theme of Fighter: stagger and knockdown. In order for Perfect Block to work, we first need the Deflect core skill, which is unlocked at rank 3. Then we need our shield's stagger stat to be on par with the enemy. Some enemies require higher stagger from the shield. Some attacks require higher stagger from the shield. You may find that your Perfect Block is timed correctly, but you're not doing the damage and you're not doing the stagger. That's likely because your shield is too weak. You need to upgrade it or get a new shield. Perfect Block does not cost any stamina, even if your shield is too weak, but you are vulnerable with the animation. Barbed Nails do not increase the shield's stagger. The Periphery Augment does, but still, the Barbed Nails are good for Fighter, increasing stagger, increasing knockdown. Your skill setup should be up to you, what works for you. Me personally, I like to have 1 skill for damage and 1 for iframes and 1 for utility. Antler Toss versus Full Moon Slash. Why not have both? I do. Full Moon Slash for the benefit of iframes, also damage. Antler Toss, primarily damage, knockdown. And then utility, I don't know, I like Skewer. I like Dragon's Maw. Blink Strike too. And Augments are also preference. Aggression is very nice to have on Fighter. Stability is also very nice to have. I do recommend never equipping Prescience. What happens with Prescience is you learn how to perfect block with Prescience active, that time window, and then you can never remove that augment. You will always need it. If you instead learn without Prescience, then you will never need it. The Periphery augment is sometimes needed, but you can usually keep your shield upgraded and updated. The Adamant's augment is very nice to have while you're learning how to perfect block. Once you've got perfect block down and set, then you shouldn't need Adamant's anymore. So I have here some shields that have a high enough stagger number and some shields that will not. The lower ones can perfect block enemies that are lower level, like goblins and some bandits, Saurians that you find in Grancis, but later, once you reach harder enemies, it will not be effective as a tool anymore. You will need to get a better shield. Eventually you'll need to have the highest shield and the highest upgraded shield to perfect block all enemies. For practice, find an easy enemy that you can predict their attack patterns and practice on their attacks. Once you've mastered that enemy, move on to the next. And just move up and up. Start at Goblin, to Bandit, to Saurian, and eventually you reach Daemon. By that time, you've got perfect block down. It's just natural. And all of that without Prescience. But if you learn with Prescience, you will find struggle to never remove Prescience. Strongly recommend leave that augment off. Instead, try the Adamants so you're not losing all that stamina in the practice process. So this shield here, perfect blocked time-wise, this giant Saurian, but because it's not high enough stagger, I was unable to stagger him and also deflect, cause damage. I still did not lose any stamina, but the animation, I was left vulnerable. And I took damage because he attacked me immediately after while I'm staggered, even though my shield is supposed to stagger him. Get a better shield, and then problem solved. Now I know a lot of you love Skyward Slash and you have to have it because harpies, but you don't actually need it for harpies. Instead, you can just let them chase you and then use your iframe skill. Get them down to your level. The only reason you have Skyward Slash is because they're above you. Convince them to get down to your level and then do an iframe or perfect block, and then you don't need that skill anymore. It's a wasted skill on 90% of the enemies. Now there's always a debate with Antler Toss versus Full Moon Slash. One has a benefit over the other one has a benefit over the other. Both are damage. It depends on what you're going for. If you've got a different iframe skill that you'd rather have, then you don't need Full Moon. Or if you have a different knockdown skill, then you won't need Antler Toss. For the iframe skills, it is always preference. Do you want one that lasts a long time, like Dragon's Maw? Do you want one that's really short, like Broad Slash, which is very fun when you use just the core attacks, and Broad Slash becomes very fun to play. Or you want something that's just in the middle. Hindsight, I've never liked, mostly because it pulls away, and I'd rather just stay put, because you get one attack with the Hindsight, pull back, come in, get one hit. Whereas Full Moon has, I think, eight hits, and you're just standing there, iframes the whole time. And then Dragon's Maw as well, but it is heavy on stamina. This particular character that I have set up is 5,000 stamina, so it's not a big deal. But when you level purely as fighter, you're only going to have like 2,500 at the end. And that Dragon's Maw really noticeable. Each vocation has a theme, a main goal, a purpose. And fighter is stagger and knockdown. It's also mitigating. It does very good with smaller enemies. It's not a great boss killer, but it can handle smaller enemies very quickly, and that is the point. When it comes to the bigger enemies, then you rely on stagger and knockdown, which you can always get with animations and skills. And then once it's knocked down, it can be very devastating and very damaging with the correct skills. So I've already gotten one knockdown, and then with Antler Toss over and over again, I built up stagger and knockdown. You wouldn't be able to do that so much with Full Moon, and that is why I keep the Antler Toss for damage and then Full Moon for the iframes, because of that stagger, knockdown, build up.